QuickBooks Pro 2021 Budgeted Balance Sheet Reports. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro 2021. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars homepage. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the View dropdown, selecting the open windows list. In prior presentations, we put together a balance sheet. We then did the data input for the balance sheet. Now we're going to take a look at the reports, including the budget versus actual report. To do that, just remember the data input was in the company and financial. We're going to go down to the planning and budgeting and then set up budgets. So we entered the budget into this portion. If you want to take a look at that process, take a look at the prior presentation. We have entered the budget for 2 months, February and March, and now we'll be running the reports related to them. If there were any problems as we run the reports, we would go back here and make the adjustments to this data input screen. As we think about this, remember, the QuickBooks system will not force us to be in balance like it will when we do normal data input. So if something is out of balance, you'd have to go back to here to enter it into the system to make that adjustment. Closing this back out, we're going to go to the reports up top. We're going to go down to the budgeting. And let's take a look first at the overview budget. We're on the balance sheet side of things. We'll say next and finish. And let's change the dates. We only have the information in there. We have some information for January through March. So let's say 01/01/21 to 03/31/21. And that's going to give us basically our 3-month time period. Now, we have actual data in there for January, but we didn't make a budget for January. Therefore, when we just look at the budget, we have nothing there. When we look at the budget versus actual, we'll have some data there because we'll have the budget side, but not the actual side. February, when we think about February, we entered both the budget and now we're imagining that that time period has now passed. So now we have the actual data and the budget data. This report just shows the budgeted data. And then in March, we're imagining the situation where March has not yet passed. And therefore, we have the budget information. But when we do the budget versus the actual, the added information for March will not be there. There'll still be numbers in there because it's the balance sheet and they are permanent accounts. But they haven't been adjusted for the activity that would take place in March. Now, also note that if you were to go to the customized reports up top, it's currently showing this as months. If you were to say, I want to look at the totals and just say total, notice we're still just going to get this outer column then. If I say OK, it just shows you March. Unlike the income statement, which would combine the three together, because the income statement is a performance report and the balance sheet is going to be this point in time report. So when we look at 3 months, we're looking at the point in time for 3 months, not earnings for 3 months as we would do for like an income statement or performance report. So I'm going to go to customize once again. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to go back to the months. So we're going to say months and we have that. So there we have it. Now, January is not really adding us any information for this particular report if we just want to use the budgets, because all we have for budgeting thus far is where we think we're going to be for February, which now we're imagining that time has passed. And then March, projecting out 1 month into the future. So I'm going to change the beginning date to 02/01/21. The end of the month would be the same, just the month of February. Let's do that again. 02/21/21, not 01. And then we have February and March. Let's do our standard kind of formatting. Before I do that, just note that to check if we're in balance down here, we're not exactly in balance again, because it's off by rounding, it looks like, so it looks pretty close. If we wanted to make the adjustments to them, then we would have to go into the adjustments in the data input form and then adjust that out. So again, QuickBooks doesn't force us to be in balance here as they would for the normal balance sheet when we do the normal data input process. So I'm going to leave it as it is for now and just realize that you'd have to go adjust that in the data input if you wanted to make it exact, and noting it's rounding at this point in time. So let's customize this. I'm going to go to customize reports and let's go to the header and footer, do our standard process, remove date, time, and report basis. And then I'm going to say OK. And so that looks good. Let's get rid of the pennies. So I'm going to go back to the customize fonts and numbers, get rid of the cents, get rid of the put it in parentheses and make the negative numbers red. So that looks good. I'm going to say OK, and that's what we have thus far. That's our standard type of formatting. Let's go ahead and print this out using the Qt PDF printer and then we will export it to Excel, the same Excel file that we had when we did our income statement items. So I'm going to go to the reports dropdown. We're going to then, we're going to first print it. Let's print it, the report. And I'm going to print it using the Qt PDF printer, which means it'll basically print it as a PDF. It'll print to a PDF printer. It's going to ask us where do we want to put it. I should be changing the item here to 11, the budgeting section, which is now going to be the balance sheet budget overview. I'm going to say, and you could put the date 02/28/21, so 02.28.21, and then I'm going to say save, and then let's export it as well. I'm going to export it to the same Excel sheet we put with the income statement budgets on. So export, create a new worksheet. It's going to ask me where do we want to put it. So and I'm going to say existing workbook, browse. I'm going to put it into this workbook. I want to put it into the budgeted reports. That's the one. And then I'm going to say export. Then I'll do the standard formatting. I'm going to pull this to the right if it's not all the way at the right already. And then I'm going to delete this first tab, right click and delete. And I've renamed these other two to put a P&L so that I know it's a profit and loss budget versus the balance sheet. So you could double click and put a P&L budget, double click here, P&L budget versus actual. And this is going to be, I'm going to call it BS or balance sheet. This is budget. And so then we'll do the standard type of formatting. I'm going to go to the second view, OK, and then view tab up top. I'm going to go to the Windows group, remove the split panes, then go back to the first tab, and it looks pretty good, so I'll keep it at that. I'm going to go ahead and close it and save it. And yes, and then we'll go to our second report, budget versus actual, reports drop down. We're going to go to the budgeting, and we want to take a look at the budget versus actual balance sheet report. That's the one we want. I'm going to say OK, finish. And so now we've got this comparison. I'll change the dates to the range we have, 01/01/21 to 03/31/21. And so now in January, we have what actually happened, but we didn't enter a budget. So we have no comparison. Therefore, the difference doesn't give us much detail or anything, or the percentage change. In February, we have both the actual data and the budgeted data. So here's what actually happened. That data input has been put in place. So this is where we stand as of the end of February. We're imagining that time being now. And then the budget, this is where we projected to be after the end of January. And so this is now February. We're kind of thinking about this is where we stand. February 28th has passed. So we have the actual data, the budgeted data, the difference between the two. And then we have March, where we have the budgeted information. We did a budget based on January's information, but we're imagining that has not yet happened yet. And therefore, this column, the actual column, although it has numbers in it, does not have the current data for the current month included. It's not zero as it would be for like the income statement, because we have it's a permanent account, so it has the prior balances in it from the prior period that just stay there. They're permanent, but they haven't been changed by the data input that would be taking place in March. So that means that this comparison and percentage comparison are not valid, although the budget is valid. These three columns are all valid for February, and then for January, we don't have any budget, but the actual number is valid. Okay, so let's think about how we can use this data. So when we export it, we might want to just see the valid column here, which is going to be the budget versus actual for the time period that has passed, where we have both the budgeted number and the actual number. So we'll change that up top from 02/01/21 to 02/28/21. And so there we have it. So now we have the actual data for the point in time, which has now passed, February 28th. We have the budget that we put in place after January, and then we have the difference between the two. Again, this isn't a performance statement here. So we're just saying, where do we stand as of these 2 points in time? And then we have the percentage of the budget and the actual budget to actual percentage column. So let's go ahead and format this and print it in this format. We'll change the format slightly when we export it to Excel, because we might want some more data in Excel, and we might be able to format our reports a little bit differently by exporting to Excel. So I'm going to go up top, customize the reports. Going to go to the header and footer. I'm going to remove the date, time, and report basis. Let's go to the fonts and numbers. Let's do our pennies, get rid of the pennies. We're going to be saying I want it red and parentheses around negative numbers and OK. Let's go ahead and print this now. So I'm going to say, let's print it to the Qt PDF printer, print to the report. And it's going to the Qt PDF printer. I'm going to say OK. That'll save it as a PDF in essence. So I'm going to say, all right, let's put it down here. This is going to be the budget, let's say balance sheet, budget versus actual, and then I'm going to save that. Now let's adjust it a little bit, export it to Excel, and then we can do further formatting. So I might want that added data that we have. I just want to remove like the columns that do not matter to me. So maybe I want to say, let's take a look at 010121 to 033121. Let's export this whole thing, even though it has some columns that we don't need, and then do some formatting in Excel. So I'm going to say, let's export this. I'm going to create a new worksheet. I'm going to put this into an existing workbook. So it's going to ask me, where do I want to put it? I'm going to go to the existing workbook. That should be going where I want it. So it looks like it is. So I'm going to say, okay. And then let's export that. There we have it. Let's maximize this. I'm going to pull this to the right now. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to double click on it. This is the balance sheet, budget versus actual. And then I'm going to do some standard formatting. We'll go to the view over here, say OK. I'm going to go to the view panes, and we're going to go Windows and remove the splits. Go back to the first tab. Now we have our formatting in terms of the page splits, but we also have some other formatting in terms of the columns that aren't useful to us. So for example, this column here isn't useful to me, and these two columns are not useful to me, but I might want this column, the actual numbers. So I have the actual but not the budget. So I'm just going to delete all of these. I'm going to say, let's just delete this. I don't need these spacer columns either. I'm going to just remove that, so I'll delete that. And then as far as February goes, this whole thing for February is valid. So maybe I'll just keep February, but maybe I'll delete the inner columns. I'm holding down Control and I'll just delete those inner columns and say, let's delete those. So that's all valid. And then in March, the actual data is not valid, but the budget is valid. So maybe I want to delete the actual data and say delete, because that hasn't been done yet. We haven't gotten there yet. So that doesn't include actual data. And that means these two columns are no longer valid, the difference and the percentage change, but the budget is valid. So I'll delete those. And then we might, have some kind of report looking something like this, right? It might give it, this is where we stood actually. We might want to change the headers up top, put actual, and budget. But this is where we stood actual versus, and this is the information actual for February, budget February, and then the difference for February budget versus actual percentage change. And this is actually where we stood for March. So this is going to be 03 30, this is going to 03 31 21, something like that. We'd probably want to change the headers. I won't get into the headers, but you can see how, you might want to adjust the report to do something like that to give you more flexibility using Excel than you might have in QuickBooks. I won't get into the formatting. Again, these headers could probably be formatted, will surely be formatted better if you were to make an adjustment like that. So let's save it where it is now then, and I could save this, and then we can make one PDF file with these reports on it, as we've seen in the past by going to the File tab. We're going to say we want to print it using the Qt PDF printer. I want to print the entire workbook, so we'll print the entire workbook. And notice I still have that first page on it, so I don't really want that first page. So I'm going to go back and say I have this first page. I don't want that. I'm going to delete that. Right click on that first page and delete it. All right, and say delete. Now let's check it out again. I'll go back on over. We're going to go to the print and then drop down. I want the entire workbook. So there we have the profit and loss overview. So that looks good. It goes through December. That looks good. And then we've got the profit and loss versus actual, the end of that, and then the balance sheet overview, and the balance sheet budget versus actual, and the end of that. Okay, it looks good. So I'm going to say, all right, let's print that using the Qt PDF printer, and it'll print it all on one PDF file, hopefully. So it's going to say, there it is. Let's say save. Let's check it out. And it's going to be in our reports here, in our data reports. So if I open up the data reports in section 11, then we have our information. So again, we could provide this information one item at a time, and I think I'm missing one of the P&Ls. I think I deleted it, but I'm going to say folder. I can say this is the budget, and this is going to be 02.28.21, and that would include in it the budget versus actual. Let's make this view tab larger. The balance sheet overview, and then this item. We could zip that, so we can go right click. Let's go ahead and send it to a compressed file. We can attach that then to an email, or we can attach this one PDF file to an email, which would look something like this. And we'd have everything on the one PDF file here. So it'll look like this. And so there we have that. So that's a couple ways we can format the budgeting information.